Today what we're basically going to be doing is we're going to be going through the midterm review sheet, the problems that you guys have done, and just double checking to make sure that you have the correct answers. So let's go ahead and just start with number 1. If you remember the absolute value, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out if I had a number line and a bunch of numbers. Let's say that 0 was right here, and to the left I have the negative numbers. Basically what you're trying to figure out, if I said I needed the absolute value of the number 1, it's trying to figure out how far away is that 1 from 0. How many spaces away is it?
1.
It's just 1 space, okay? But if I were to have the absolute value of negative 2, you're trying to figure out how many spaces away that negative 2 is from 0, which would be what? Not negative 2, positive 2, okay? So your absolute value, it can't be negative because all you're doing is you're finding the distance it is away from 0. So these few problems that we have here are not just whole numbers, okay? I've got for here the negative absolute value of negative 1 3/4. Does anybody know what I need to do with this negative sign that's on the outside of the absolute value bars? What should I do?
Bring it down.
Okay, that negative is going to drop down before anything else. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of looking at this right here. What is the absolute value of negative 1 3/4?
1 3/4.
It's just 1 3/4. So your final answer is what, guys?
Negative 1 3/4.
Okay, there's no work that you need to show aside from just the answer. Does anyone want to do number 2 for me? All right, Nikki, what's the absolute value of negative 3.2?
3.2.
Good job. It's just 3.2 because it's 3.2 places away from the 0. Okay, any questions about absolute value? All right, let's move on to the next one. For these ones here, it says to find the sum or the difference of the integers. This song that we learned at the beginning of the year had to do with adding and subtracting integers. How did it go? Same sign, add a heap, different sign, subtract. Take the sign of the larger number, then you'll be exact. So let's look at this first part right here. 32 minus 48. Every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. Good job. So for this one, even though I can't see a sign, what is that?
16.
It's a positive, okay? So do I have the same sign or a different sign there? Different sign. Now, if you remember, there's a note at the top of your review sheet that says you're not allowed to use a calculator on this portion, okay? So we're not using calculators for this section. So if I have different signs here, what do I need to do? I'm going to subtract. You're just going to use your paper right there as your scratch paper. Guys, what's 48 minus 32?
16.
16. Now, take the sign of the larger number. Was that positive or negative?
Negative.
It was negative. So what's the answer? Negative 16. Good job. Now, problem 4, I've got kind of an unusual situation here. It says negative 37 minus negative 15. What is this called right here? A double negative. What happens to a double negative? They become a positive. So this right here, instead of being negative, that means positive. So this means negative 37 plus 15. Check with your partner to see if you guys have the same answer. Same sign or different sign, guys? So what do I have to do? Subtract. So for those of you who are getting bigger numbers, you know you shouldn't probably have a bigger number. You're taking 37 and subtract 15. Take the sign of the larger number. Was that positive or negative? Negative, okay? So a lot of you even got positive 22, but you got to make sure that you take the sign of the larger number. Okay, for problem 5 and 6, it says to find the sum or difference of the rational numbers. So Madison, help me out. What do you think I should do first with problem number 5? Okay. Let's go ahead, and she says she wants to turn this into an improper fraction. So what do you get when you do that?
Negative 11 over 8.
Negative 11 eighths
Plus 3/4.
plus 3/4. Okay. Now, guys, do I need a common denominator when I add and subtract?
Yes.
I do. What should my common denominator be?
8.
8. So how do I get this to turn into eighths?
You have to multiply the 2.
Okay, times 2 on top and bottom. Because remember, 2 over 2 simply means 1. So I am multiplying it times the number 1. What does that equal?
6/8.
Okay, that's going to equal 6/8. So now I'm going to go ahead and drop down negative 11/8. And remember, we turned this into that 6/8. Should I add or subtract that 6/8?
Subtract.
Add the 6/8 because there was an add sign there. Now, once again, let's look at this. Every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. Same sign or different sign?
Different sign.
Different sign. So what do I have to do? Subtract. What's 11/8 minus 6/8?
Negative 5 over 8.
Okay, 5/8, and then take the sign of the larger number?
Negative 5.
Negative 5/8. Raise your hand if you got that one on your own. Excellent. Listen, if you didn't, that's okay, but you need to erase whatever it is that you put in there for your homework and correct it with this, okay? Because once again, these notes are becoming your study guide for the midterm that we're going to have next week. Number 6, who wants to do this one for me? All right, William. Negative 5.35 plus negative 4.02.
Okay, what you do is, since they're both...
Okay, so here's what you notice. That's a negative, that's a negative. So he knows same sign, add and keep. Okay, so we're going to add them together. What do you get?
9.37. Negative 9.37.
Okay, and notice he said negative because you want to keep the sign. Very good job. Okay, another thing that some people have said even throughout today, they notice this right here, plus a minus. Who always wins out of plus minus?
Negative.
The negative always wins, okay? So if you remember, if you're adding a negative number, it simply means you're subtracting. So some people today have done 5.35 minus 4.02. In any case, you would still see that's a negative, this is a negative, and you're going to add it and do the work exactly like he just did for us, okay? Excellent job. Okay, copy and complete the statement using less than, greater than, or equal to. There is actually some work that I want to see on a problem like this. If you see negative 8, there's really nothing I can do with that negative 8. But this right here, do we know what the absolute value of negative 8 is?
Yes.
What is it? 8. It's just plain old 8, okay? So this right here, I want to see everyone have this in their notes, and on your midterm, I want to see that there too. This is showing you understand what those lines mean right there. Okay, so Harmony, negative 8 and positive 8. What sign should go there in the middle? Okay, very good. It's going to be less than because negative 8 is less than the absolute value of negative 8. Let's go on to the next one. Alexis, help me out. What should I do first? Very good. Instead of this, we no longer want to have those absolute values right there. So we know the absolute value of 0.5 is just plain old 0.5. Now, notice the difference. This is a decimal while that is a fraction. In order to compare, they need to be in the same form. So, Alexis, what does 3/4 mean as a decimal? 0.75. Now, if you notice right here, this has 2 places. If I wanted to make this have 2 places to easily compare it, what would that 0.5 be? Okay, so it basically would be 0.50. Alexis, read me, what would it say from left to right? Good job. 0.50 is less than 0.75, which means the absolute value of 0.5 is less than 3/4. And then go ahead and box your answers in. Next section. You guys are doing great, by the way. Evaluate the expression when h equals negative 3, w equals 5, and y equals 6. Repeat after me. Plug it in, plug it in.
Plug it in, plug it in.
We did this way back at the beginning of the year, okay? And all we're doing is we're plugging things in. So, Charbel, instead of h minus y, what should I plug in?
Put negative 3 minus 6.
Excellent. Now, guys, I want to see that step in your notes. If you don't have it there, please put it in. And Charbel, what's my answer?
The answer...
Okay. Why is the answer negative 9?
I see that the negative 3 is negative y.
Okay, here's why. Same sign, add the numbers, keep the sign. So we added 3 plus 6, which is 9, and we have to keep that negative sign. Who would like to do problem 10? Hunter, go ahead.
So since w equals 5, we're going to do negative 5
Negative 5 plus
plus negative 3.
plus negative 3.
We can either keep the plus or get rid of the plus and put in the negative.
Okay, so he's saying we could, since we know right here plus minus, he's saying that you could just go ahead and make it negative 5 minus 3, or you don't have to do that step. Either one's fine. What's the answer?
The answer is negative 8.
Negative 8. Once again, same sign, add the numbers, keep the sign. Find the product. This means we're multiplying them together. Is this the same rule as when we just added them together? No. With adding them, we say same sign, add and keep, different signs, subtract and take. Right next to this one right there, I want you to go ahead and write these notes down because this is going to help you when you're studying or reviewing next week. If you have an even number of negatives, will your answer be positive or negative?
Positive.
It will be positive. Which means the opposite. If you have an odd number of negatives, what's your answer going to be?
Negative.
It's going to be negative. This is the rule that you need for multiplying or dividing. Okay, so write that in your notes for me, please. On that note, let's just figure out what the sign should be first. If I have one negative, is the number 1 even or odd? Odd. So that helps me to know an odd number of negatives means my answer is going to be negative. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead before I do anything else. I'm going to put that. Then, guys, what's the total answer? 3 times negative 5?
Negative 15.
Negative 15. Next up, there's something I could do. I could just multiply across and I could see, okay, this is going to be 24 over 48. But it's kind of big. So what could I do to make that number not so big because I'm not using a calculator? Taylor, what can I do?
You can reduce.
Okay, I can cross-reduce. Taylor, help me with what I can do to cross-reduce these.
You can reduce 4. You can make 4 a 1 and the 8 a 2.
Excellent.
And the 3 can become a 1 and the 12 can become a 4.
Very good, okay? Now, looking at this, I have 1 negative and 1 positive. If I have an odd number of negatives, my answer is going to be negative, okay? You got to memorize that rule. Hopefully you still remember that. So negative. Taylor, what is the answer?
1/2 or 2/4.
Okay, so we get negative 2/4. And as he said, he understood that's not reduced. Remember, you always have to make sure things are simplified or reduced into lowest terms. So Taylor, what's the final answer? Not just 1/2.
Oh, negative 1.
Negative 1/2 is correct. How many of you got that right on your own? Okay, if you didn't, please erase what it is that you had and go ahead and fix it. Okay. Once again, we're going to still use that same kind of idea about the even and odd number of negatives. Looking at this problem right here, how many negatives do I have?
2.
I got 2. That's an even number, so we know our answer is going to come out as a positive number. So let's kind of work through this. We're just going to go from left to right. Help me out with this. What's negative 4 times 2, class?
8.
Not 8. Negative 8, and then I'm going to go ahead and drop down times negative 3. What is negative 8 times negative 3?
Negative 24.
Positive 24, okay, because I had 2 negatives there. Okay, let's go to the next one. What does this little tiny 2 mean that's up here?
Multiply by the same number.
You multiply by.
Okay, it's an exponent, so because of that, it's a square, which means you're multiplying it by itself. I want to see this work right now, so if you don't have it in there, this means negative 3 times,
3. Negative
not times 3.
Negative 3.
It's multiplied by itself. Negative 3 times
Negative 3.
negative 3.
Oh.
Okay, it does not, I just heard some people say it means negative 3 times 2. That's not what the square means. The square means you multiply it by itself. So let's just imagine a couple review. 4 squared, what's that mean?
8.
It doesn't mean 8. It means 4 times 4. 5 squared, what does that mean?
5 times 5.
5 times 5. Negative 2 squared, what does that mean?
Negative 2 times negative 2.
Very good job. Okay, so just be reminded when you see that little square, it means it's multiplying it by itself. So now let's look at this part. 2 negatives multiplied by each other. Is the answer going to be positive or negative?
Positive.
It's got to be positive, so what's the answer?
9.
Positive 9. For the next part, same rule applies as multiplying, okay? Negative 9 divided by 3. How many negatives do you see? 1. So is my answer going to be positive or negative? It's got to be a negative. Guys, what's 9 divided by 3? 3. So your final answer is? Negative 3. Next up, who'd like to help me with this next problem? Taylor, go ahead.
So you can't divide to multiply. You have to do KS.
All right, excellent reminder. We are not allowed to divide fractions. So we're going to do the KFC method. Remind me, it's been a little while since we talked about this. Guys, what does KFC stand for?
Keep the first, flip the second, change the operation.
Keep the first one, flip the second one, change the operation. So Taylor, help us to understand what we're doing.
So you put down 8 over 9 at the bottom, and then you just put like a dot for the multiplying sign.
Okay, we're going to keep the first one.
And you change the operation.
We're going to flip the
Flip the second one. -2 over 4.
good job. And then
Change the operation.
and change the operation. Okay, you can put a little dot there. You can put the parentheses. Both of those mean to multiply. Okay, now what, Taylor?
You reduce 3 and the 9, and it becomes 1 and 3.
Okay, remember, we talked about cross-reducing. You can only do that when you're multiplying fractions, okay?
And then you cross multiply the 4 and the 8, and it becomes 1 and 2.
Excellent.
And then 2 times 1 is 2, and 3 times 1 is 3.
So your final answer?
2/3.
Okay, now go back to, once again, the original problem. You have one negative, so your answer has to come out as a negative. Write the mixed number as a decimal. A lot of times people today have written their answer incorrectly. If it says right here you want it as a decimal, make sure your answer comes out as a decimal, okay? So we want to really make sure that we're looking at the instructions. Madison, what'd you get? Okay, how'd you find your answer? Okay, so here's what she did. She understood, I'm guessing this is a fact you've memorized before, that you understand 1/4 means 0.25. So all she did was she took her whole number, dropped it down, and then instead of writing 1/4, she knew it meant 0.25. Now, if you don't have that memorized, what could you do to help you figure out what that means? Hunter, what could I do?
So since you know that 5.
Okay, so Cameron says, let's go ahead and change this right here to an improper fraction. What would that be as an improper fraction?
21 over 4.
Okay, so 21 over 4. Listen, a lot of people today left me their answer like this. What's wrong with that? That came out as a fraction. I want it to be a decimal. So if you remember, this fraction bar means to divide. So all I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and take 21 divided by 4. And just work it out. 5 times 4 is 20. Drop down the 10. 2 times 4 is 8. And then you can see right here, you got the same exact answer, but there was a way that you could work it out. Okay, so excellent job, Cameron. Moving on to the next one, -3 and 2/10. Help me out with it, please, Sierra. What'd you do? Okay, so for her, she kind of had it memorized also in her head. She understands the whole number is -3. And then with this, she gets that 2/10 means 0.2. Is there anyone who figured it out a different way? What'd you do? Okay, so what Nehemiah says that he did, he changed this right here to an improper fraction. What do you get as an improper fraction? Okay, -32 over 10. And then all he did over here was he just went ahead and worked it out. This is if you don't know it already. 3 times 10 is 30. 2 times 10 is 20. And then once again, we see that it was a negative right here, so we want to keep our answer still as a negative, okay? On your midterm, I don't care. If you have it memorized, you can just put the answer down. If you don't, you can go ahead and show work. I will accept your answer either way. Next up, modeling real life. A shark is 60 feet below the surface of the water. I've told you this before. Sometimes we can get overwhelmed when we see a bunch of words for a story problem. So a lot of times it helps to have little pictures that might break it up, okay? So here's the water. If something is the water, you go up, it's positive. You go down, it's negative. What do you think the water level is? What number would that be?
0.
A 0, okay? That's base level. So it says right here the shark is 60 feet below the surface. So if I am below the surface, what number is that? -60. This is what it says. It swims up and it jumps out of the water to a height of how much above the surface?
18 feet.
Is that a positive or a negative? Okay, 18 feet. Now what it says, find the distance that the shark traveled. Write an equation to help you solve the problem. At the very beginning of the year, in the first couple chapters, we talked about distance and how to find the distance between two numbers. What you do is you take the number that has the bigger value and you subtract the number that has the smaller value. What number has a bigger value? 18, that's positive, or negative 60? 18, that's positive, is the bigger value. So I'm going to take the bigger value, which is 18, and subtract the smaller value. What's the smaller value number? Not just 60. Negative 60. What do I have there in my equation? A double negative. What happens to a double negative? Okay, we're going to turn these into a positive. So when I rewrite that underneath it, guys, what's 18 plus 60?
78.
Okay, now remember, modeling real life, you got to have units attached, so it's 78 feet. Was there anyone who got that right on their own? Excellent. If you didn't, please go ahead and erase it. Put in that correct answer for me. Now here's what you can kind of tell. If I am looking from this distance right here to this distance right here, I can tell that this up here was 18 and this distance was 60. So all you have to do is add those two, 18 plus 60, and you can see that big distance was 78. The temperature is negative 10 degrees at 5 p.m. 6 hours later, the temperature dropped by 13 degrees. What is the temperature at 11 p.m.? Write an expression to help solve the problem. I want you to check your answer with your partner and see what you guys came up with. All right, I saw a lot of you guys who had the same answers, but there were a few who had some different answers. This has asked us to write an expression. So let's go ahead and start with what the temperature was at the beginning. What was the temperature at the beginning, guys?
10 degrees.
Not 10 degrees. Negative 10 degrees Celsius, okay? So if I start at a negative, then it says 6 hours later the temperature dropped. If something drops, what is happening to it?
Negative. It's getting lower.
It's getting lower, so what we got to do is subtract it, okay? How much am I subtracting? 13 degrees Celsius. Same sign or different sign?
Different sign.
Same sign.
Same sign. That's a negative. That's a negative. Okay. Same sign. Add and keep. What do you get?
Negative 23 degrees Celsius.
Okay. Very good. Negative 23 degrees Celsius. Please remember, once again, it's a modeling real life problem. You must have units attached. All right, for the next section, we've got some terms that here are very important information. Help me out, Haley. What is a term with a variable in it called? Very good. It's not too difficult. This is a variable term. Next up, Janet. What is another name for a letter in math?
Variable.
A variable. Okay, you can use any different kinds of variables. Ayana, what is the number part of a variable term? Coefficient. Guys, check it out. If you don't have these spelled correctly, go ahead and fix it for your notes. And the final one, Nikki, what is a number that stands alone?
Constant.
Constant. So we're going to use these four terms now to answer the next three questions. Looking at the first one, Cameron, what are the variable terms in the expression 6x plus 4 minus 5 plus 7x? If you remember from long ago, we underlined and circled the like terms. Who can help me with what the like terms are? Hunter?
No.
All right, we're going to go ahead and underline 6x. What else is like the 6x? 7x. And what are the other like terms?
Positive 4, negative 5.
Okay, so go ahead and circle positive 4 and negative 5. This just helps us to identify the two different kinds of terms, okay? Cameron, what are, this specifically, the variable terms here? 6x and 7x is correct, okay? Because if you remember, guys, the variable term, it tells us, is a term with a variable in it. So anything that has a letter in it is a variable term. Harmony, let's look at the next one. What are the constants in the expression 7m plus 5m minus 3 minus 4? Tell me what to underline and circle, Harmony. Good job. 7m and 5m are both in the m family. Then what else? Negative 3 and negative 4. Good job. Now, Harmony, what are the constants? Remind me again, what is a constant? A number that stands alone. In that expression right there, what are the numbers that stand alone? Negative 3 and negative 4. Good job, because they do not have a variable that's attached to them. Nice work. Going on to the next one, Alexis. What are the coefficients in the expression 6d plus 5 minus 2 minus 3d? Help me to understand what I should underline and circle. Good job. Thank you for remembering to underline the negative that came before the term. Okay, positive 5 and negative 2. Remind me again, what is a coefficient? The number part of a variable term. So you're looking for the variable term, and then you're only going to tell me the number part. What is it, Alexis? 6 and negative 3 is correct. Next one, simplify the expression. How many of you got similar answers to your partner? Okay, let's underline and circle the terms. Haley, what is like terms for 24? Good job. Not 20. Good job. Always take that sign with it. Okay, let's combine. Always remember you want to put the variable term first. What's 4r plus 2r? 6r. Shavaria, what's negative 20 plus 15? Negative 5 is correct because there were different signs. You subtracted and took the sign of the larger number. Next up, Taylor, negative 5 plus 6 minus 2y plus 3. What are my like terms?
Negative 5y is negative 2y, and then 6 and 3.
Good job, Nehemiah. What are my new like terms if I combine them? What's negative 5y minus 2y? Not negative 1y. Same sign, add the numbers, keep the sign. Remember, this is a negative, that's a negative. So we got to add the numbers and keep the sign. What do you get?
Oh, negative 7.
Good job, negative 7y. And Ayana, what about the constants? Plus 9. Okay, so listen, that's all we're going to go through today. We'll start 26 tomorrow. Tonight's homework is to completely finish your midterm review sheet.